Good afternoon, everybody. We will now call this Committee of a Whole meeting Monday, August 25th, 2025, to order at 5 p.m. Firstly, we would like to respectfully acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the unceded ancestral territory of the Silks Okanagan peoples and the Splatsin of the Secwepemc Nation. Next, we'll be looking for an adoption of the agenda at the August 25th, 25 Committee of the Whole meeting agenda be as adopted as circulated.
Your worship, could I just interject there? There is a question I would like to pose, but I believe it's in camera. I know we don't have an in-camera portion to this. It has to do with land matters, and it's a question I'd like to ask the consultants. I'm not sure how we best handle that, and I should ask staff how best to handle that.
Okay, how about we proceed with our meeting to this point in time? I'll let staff research that and we'll come back to with an answer before the end of the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so it was the motion was made by Councillor Todd, second by Councillor Wayner. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. And then we'll be looking for a mover to adopt that the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting of November 28th, 2024 be adopted as circulated. And a mover, please. Councillor Fowler, second Councillor Drapala. All those in favor? This too shall be carried. And a delegation tonight, I'll ask Ms. Cordell to present our speakers.
Thank you, Your Worship. This evening, we have Dan Penner here from Urban Systems to introduce Council to the Complete Communities Report. We reviewed the kind of draft that you're looking at on Friday, and so we don't expect Council to have had a time to go through it in depth, but Dan's going to introduce it, and then we'll bring it back to a Council meeting. So I'm going to turn it over to Dan. Chantel's just bringing him the mouse so he can work the thing himself. Thanks, Dan.
No worries. Is that going to make it full screen here? Okay, well, I'll just jump into it instead of fiddling around here with the screen. So yeah, appreciate your time. Just building off what Lori had mentioned, we were doing quite a bit of back and forth last week with some final revisions and tweaks and edits to the report. So apologies for a bit of the delay on getting the full report over to you. So yeah, we weren't expecting anyone to come in with a full read through of the report. It's almost 100 pages long, so there's a lot to get through. So we wanted to use this presentation just to sort of frame like what is the report, what is in the report, what was the intent in developing it and going through this process, and how can we take some of the information and some of the analysis that's included within it, moving forward in terms of decision making and some of the actions that have been flagged as potentially things to pursue and implement here in the future. So yeah, really, the purpose is just to give you an overview of the report, some of the broader findings that are contained within it, and to give you context in support of your own review. So, in the future, if you really want to dig into it, this will just help explain the contents and how it was developed. And then again, there's always an opportunity if needed in the future to have a follow-up if you want to have more of a discussion at it. We're happy to come back and do another council presentation. Part of the agenda, we'll just talk about the project background and complete communities as a whole. We'll look at the different lenses of analysis and related findings that were brought forward into the report, and then how it can be applied in the future in terms of decision making and implementation, and then just some time for questions at the end here as needed. So just a refresher. So what is a complete community? It's really a concept that is used to describe a community or a neighborhood where all of the amenities that would support quality of life are located within an appropriate or scaled walkshed from where people live. So the idea is within a roughly 15 to 20 minute walk of anywhere where people are living, they should be able to access daily amenities, whether it's daycares, commercial spaces, retail spaces, grocery stores, access to other amenities, park spaces, other things that support quality of life, that within a 15 to 20-minute walk, there's access to different transportation options, access to different forms and types of housing. It's really just about creating diverse and multi-use neighborhoods or communities. In terms of the background of this project, this is all born out of a UBCM initiative to provide funding for communities to do what's called a complete communities analysis, which is largely a geospatial analysis, which means using mapping software and mapping data to sort of understand how things fit together and the relative proximities between things like housing and amenities in the community. So back of last spring, we helped the city prepare an application to this program. You received funding and we were selected to help or to complete the project on your behalf. And knowing that that project has to follow some pretty strict program criteria. So the type of analysis that we had to do has to follow this complete communities guide, which really lays out, this is how you do this type of assessment, the data that you look at, how you have to process it, and the types of analysis that you would draw from it. So like the work that we've done today, I think presents some really, interesting findings, but, there are questions in the past about, well, can we, tailor the, the analysis this way or consider these other areas? And we were kind of limited to the scope of work that's in this complete communities guide. So yeah, just to reaffirm that this was 100% funded by UBCM as part of their complete communities program. So our objectives, sorry, let me get out of this. Our objectives for this project really ties back to some of the work done through the official community plan, which I know you recently adopted. And through that OCP, there was a bit of a change in really opening up some areas for further infill and development versus what's been traditionally allowed in the past. So we wanted to use this project as an opportunity to understand, like, based on that policy and that direction, what is the actual capacity for infill growth and development when looking at things like your servicing infrastructure, your transportation network, amenities that exist within the community. Also trying to understand based on, the conditions of, different neighborhoods here in the community, where and what type of growth would most likely occur. And this is an exercise where we try to understand, like, based on like the conditions of different parcels throughout the community, where might we see higher rates of infill? I'll talk about that more in a few slides. We also wanted to identify future infrastructure upgrades and where other amenities might be needed to, again, service potential growth in the future. And that was based off of a lot of work that you've been doing recently in terms of condition assessments for your water, sewer, storm, your roads. And then preparing an action plan with some higher level recommendations that address areas like housing, transportation, daily needs, and infrastructure. So if we think we're going to grow and develop in this way and we want to, maintain a strong, complete community, what are the actions that could help support that moving forward? And that's all summarized in the back of the plan. Just in terms of the process, really just a three-phase process that we've been working on since last spring, which involved in phase one, a lot of data collection. So every GIS layer that existed within the city here, we collected other available public sources of data. Some data that we ended up digitizing, like pulling old maps and turning it into a GIS format. We did a bit of project engagement as well. Over the fall and last winter, we did all of the geospatial analysis. So again, our GIS technicians overlaying all of these data sets and basically churning out mapping that shows current conditions in the community. And we'll go through some of that later just to provide an example. But that mapping is really to understand, like, what are the current conditions in terms of being a complete community. There's another analysis that looks at where are we most likely to see growth based on different conditions in the community, and then overlaying the two together to see this is where we're at and this is where we think we're going to grow. What does that look like in terms of having to provide additional park spaces, upgrading roads, like other infrastructure projects, which are again flagged in the implementation plan that we developed over the summer with staff. So when you read the report, and there is a lot of information to go through, so I apologize. I'm trying to cram this all into 20 minutes. But there are, I would say, 4 key components of the document. So the first is a likelihood of redevelopment analysis. which is about understanding like what portions of the community are most likely to see future development or infill. And that's based off of a number of like metrics that like we've developed. And we've applied this analysis to many other communities across BC, but it looks at, you know, what is like the age of buildings on parcels, the relative value of like the building versus the property. You know, if a land has a really high assessed value and it's much higher proportionally to the building's assessed value, that's typically an indicator of redevelopment. It means high value land, low value building that can be knocked down and built over. But there's a whole bunch of those metrics that we look at to try to figure out which areas are most likely to be developed in the future. You can see in the map, it's all of those parcels that are in black were the ones that scored the highest based on that analysis. We did existing conditions mapping as well. So when you go through the report for housing, transportation, infrastructure, daily needs, there's mapping that shows, again, what are the current conditions in the community based on the information that we have. And then there's composite mapping, which, you know, takes these likelihood of redevelopment maps. So what parcels do we think are most likely going to redevelop? And it overlays them on the existing conditions mapping. And that's where you can start to see the analysis come out, right? We're saying if we think there's going to be large concentrations or clusters of development in this area, you know, if we, you know, analyze that versus the current conditions of this particular area, we can find some gaps, whether again, it's servicing or, you know, proximity to park spaces or other daily needs. And that analysis goes into a list of actions at the back of the report that range from everything from bylaw and policy updates to the development of new programs to identifying like maybe priority capital projects that you could consider moving forward, right? And it's just, again, they're recommendations that are not intended to like handcuff and say we have to do this. It just says this could support the community growing to be a more complete community over time. So I'll just quickly go through those key kind of analysis areas. The first is this likelihood of development. So when we look at this map, it's really to understand where are the concentrations of lots or areas or clusters of lots within the community that exhibit conditions that are more preferential to development. And this is information, you know, it's not trying to forecast the future. Like we don't know how the community is going to grow and develop, you know, over time, but it says this is probably where you could expect to see it happen in certain areas. And you can use this information over time to make decisions on where do we need to be more proactive in planning, you know, transportation or, you know, servicing upgrades, or where we need to, you know, maybe amend our bylaws to allow certain types of development to happen. The data sources that we use to develop this map include like things like building age, lot size, building history, the value of the buildings, assessed value of the properties. There's a whole bunch of metrics that we pull together. And again, what you can draw out of it is the identification of areas or clusters that scored really high. And for our analysis, we took the nines, the highest scoring ones, and we sort of overlaid that with our other mapping. But again, you can see, you know, especially, you know, along Okanagan Street and the kind of core parts of the community, there's a lot of like dark orange and dark red, which kind of aligns with some of our feelings during the OCP process, that there are a lot of larger parcels with older homes that may be more likely to see redevelopment in the future, especially those with like lane access. And just one note, there are some constraints in the complete communities analysis. Like it's not 100% bulletproof. It's just based off of information that we have. So you may see like this map, for example, and know, well, I know this property, you know, has half of the parcel is steep slopes and undevelopable. So maybe it isn't like, you know, the 9 that it's rated. And that's because we can't break this analysis down into a parcel by parcel level. Like we can't look at those other factors. So again, it's good guiding information, but there are little discrepancies noted throughout. In terms of infrastructure, the complete communities assessment really looks at what portions of the community are most readily serviced and ready for growth versus those that are maybe unprepared and need upgrades in order to facilitate growth. And again, this information was just based off of what we have available to us right now. So it's a good like indicator, but I wouldn't take it as like, you know, it doesn't replace like detailed modeling that you would want to do for a individual development. So we used, again, the work that's been done over recent years, like your water, sewer, storm, your road condition assessments. And we basically looked at, when we overlay that information with where we think this growth is going to occur or most likely to occur, where are the discrepancies? Are there areas that have lower levels of servicing or have infrastructure that is near the end of its life cycle that's aligned or in the proximity of these black parcels or these higher scored parcels? And you could derive from that some information that can help you decide, like, where should we prioritize upgrades in the future. So some key findings when you go through the report, it mentions several like specific streets and general areas that say servicing infrastructure may be more limited. There's anticipated growth here, something to look into further. Another key finding is just noting that there is limited stormwater infrastructure throughout the community. So when it comes to like infill development, there is likely going to need to be some updates to your subdivision development and servicing bylaw to account for different on-site stormwater management strategies for infill development. And in the report, there's like multiple maps, but this just shows like this is the sanitary capacity map, the storm main capacity map. Oops, sorry. And there's like for each stretch of line, there are capacity scores. So color codes that say, this is the general condition of this, stretch of infrastructure for growth, or where there was data that was unavailable. So there's sanitary, storm, transportation. There's a fire flow map as well. So that's infrastructure. Transportation isn't so much looking at roads and road conditions. It's looking at transportation options. So similar to infrastructure, it's looking at areas that are maybe underserved when it comes to additional growth and development. For example, like, are there sufficient sidewalks or sufficient like sidewalk connectivity? Is it an area that has bike lanes or is planned to have bike lanes in the future? Is there transit stops nearby? And it's about mapping that existing conditions and then overlaying the growth areas over top. Some of the key findings for the transportation section is, again, Armstrong is a smaller community. It's generally fairly walkable just because of its footprint. And overall the connectivity is fairly strong and well developed. But a big factor of that is the future implementation of your bike network as described or identified in your active transportation master plan. So that's what the assessment considers. If you built out your cycling infrastructure as your active transportation plan identifies, it would give you really strong coverage and it would cover all of those growth areas that have been flagged. But there's also just in the report some notes of specific streets or areas where expansion of sidewalks or cycling or transit infrastructure would be preferential based off of anticipated growth and development in those areas. So there are maps as well that just show proximity to sidewalks, proximity to transit. There's a map that shows proximity to your future, bike network as well. The last section of importance in the report is the daily needs section. So this is a very broad area that includes everything from schools to parks and recreation to grocery stores to convenience stores to health services. It's basically all of the things a resident would access on a day-to-day basis, within the community. And similar to all of the other lenses or areas, this analysis is about trying to flag areas of the community that are maybe underserved, that if growth is going to happen here, may further exacerbate that. So through the daily needs, a lot of it is based off of just city staff info, desktop research of, again, what's in the community. We do sort of walk shed analysis to figure out what is the general walking distance between all these amenities in different portions of the community. And the key findings in the report, again, the community just by its size is generally walkable, and there's walkable access to most daily needs categories, although there are some specific amenity gaps. So some, types of amenities are a little bit harder to walk to in some of the more outer lying portions of the community. The northwest portion of the community has the lowest access to daily needs. There's park space distribution needs in the southern portion of the community, not factoring in the golf course as a park space. Again, this is all further articulated in the report as you read through it. There's more maps in the report. You can see, oops. There's a Parks and Recreation map, for example. There is a grocery store map showing the walk sheds to grocery stores in the community. We have maps like this for all of those daily amenity categories, so schools, health services, and so forth. And then the final kind of piece, which is this is something outside of most complete communities reports. This was just something we did in addition to the report. If you recall, in the official community plan, one of the key components of it was the establishment of a few like special or future development areas, where we said, these are large parcels or collections of parcels that are really integral or critical to the long-term growth and development of our community. And we want to kind of call them out and put them aside and have some policy that says, as development occurs in this area, like this is what we want to see. We want to see the development of concept plans that include these components, these uses, these densities, these amenities. So in the report, we did some 3D modeling to scale based off of using a software called City Engine that show what those OCP policies actually look like in reality to a maximum build out scenario. So you can see this image on the left shows the pellet plant area that we flagged, again, a collection of parcels. And if you took that and modeled it to like the maximum build out, that's generally what it would look like. This one here is the Patterson Avenue one as well. So same type of thing. Like if it was built out to the maximum extent enabled under the OCP, this is generally the form and density that you would see. Again, it represents a full build out. In reality, it probably wouldn't be this intensive, right? Like when you factor in like, parking provision and other items, right? Like the density will probably decrease a little bit, but it's just to demonstrate, again, what does that maximum scenario look like? And it's also a nice little piece to demonstrate that through your OCP, we have to ensure that it meets your long-term housing needs. And have policies that enable that. Like this demonstrates it. So you have, additional evidence if the province ever says, well, what are you doing to ensure you're meeting your housing needs reports? You can say, we've hit our unit needs through these future development areas. And then at the action plan at the back, there are a series of proposed recommendations for each lens. So again, some are future planning activities, some are bylaw and policy updates, some are just like general in the future. If this happens, consider this, right? Like they're decision-making tools. Some reflect, partnerships or collaboration opportunities with regional district or, other organizations. And they're intended to be for consideration and as a resource, right? Like this doesn't say, you have to do these things. But as opportunities present themselves, they would be very supportive and beneficial to, again, achieving the overall goal of becoming a complete community. So just, to kind of conclude, this report and this whole exercise is really just to provide information to staff and to yourselves to understand growth opportunities and considerations in the community. The action plan includes some items that are already happening. They've already been identified, but it kind of reaffirms that this is an important thing to do. Others are, new items that may be considered in the future. The mapping and analysis is based off of what we had that was available to us. And as a result, it's not always perfect. Like there's no complete communities report where the mapping is like 100% perfect, but the time and effort to go and try to fix all those little discrepancies can sometimes just be way outside the scope of the budget and the project. So just to keep that in mind when you're going through it, but the broader analysis is really a helpful decision-making tool, and it illustrates some of these concepts in a way that can be, also readily understood by the community, so they can be good communication tools as well. So again, I know that was a lot to go through. I'm probably over my time here, but if there are any questions, I'm happy to field them. And again, knowing that you haven't had a chance to read the full report, we're happy to set up a second, presentation if we want to have more of a discussion or answer questions after your review as well.
Thank you, Dan. Yeah, it was a lot of information in that 100-page document that we received. Anyways, any questions for Dan?
I mean, how much, I got another 20 minutes or? Yeah, like I hope that wasn't like too much to squeeze into 20 minutes. Yeah, just to help contextualize like your own review when you get a chance to dig in. And when you read through the report, it really does explain like for each analysis, like this is why we're doing it, what we look at, like how we would pull information out of it, you know, the data sets that were utilized. There's also a methodology section at the back that like further describes it. So yeah.
Any questions, Dan? Yes, Council Draper.
I'm not sure, maybe I can look to staff for the process. Just some questions about data and really specifics about the report. Is that better to run through Lori that you can ask back, or is this the time that we could do that now? Or I think we all read the report actually, so.
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Draplin, if you have like a lot of technical questions, we probably could compile them and I could get them sorted out before the next council meeting, and then we could bring them forward when we actually consider the report at council to talk about them, if that works. If it's just one or two, you know, it might be good to just ask Dan while he's here.
Sure, I mean, well, I have a couple. I don't know if I mean, my own are only a few, but I'm sure if everyone has a few, then all of a sudden it's a lot of questions, but I guess we can go ahead and try then. To start, I guess, looking at some of the special development areas. I noticed in the downtown development area, we included the flood mapping there. Was the flood mapping considered for the one on Okanagan and Rosedale? So that's, I think some of those bigger pieces that occur would really impact the potential build out.
Through your worship to Councillor Drapla, additionally, like, so those were mostly meant to show the level of density that could be on there. And we were able to integrate the flood mapping into the first one. The Okanagan one, we just used it for the density, but you'll notice even in the downtown one, we haven't accommodated for the creek, right? So they're very high level and just meant to be used as an example. One of the things about the official community plan is that we want to do some more detailed planning for those areas. And we want to avoid kind of a piecemeal approach to it. So definitely we'll be integrating any kind of flood management or environmental areas, because I think there's also just some that are outside of the floodplain but sensitive.
And then I guess another follow-up is, when you're determining walkability, do you include the existing trails? The one that caught my attention would be the one that connects over by the park, right? That goes over the train tracks. And so I just expected to see more walkability to some of those areas there if you include that trail or not that's used. So it kind of would connect Becker into those areas a bit more closely.
We just look at, it is something that could be like factored in, but we typically just look at sidewalks for like accessibility purposes. Sometimes trails aren't like the best, you know, metric to make that type of assessment if somebody's in a wheelchair or a scooter or has a mobility issue. So we typically just use sidewalks for this, but we could include maybe some commentary that speaks to trail connectivity in some of those areas that would maybe be better served if we factored it in.
Councillor Nietzsche.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. To the consultants, just I had a question regarding recommendation 2B, where you're talking about aligning parks and open spaces needs with new development and infill. And you talk in there about increasing park amenities within the Rosedale Avenue. So, of course, Rosedale Avenue runs pretty much the entire length of the community, or pretty close to it. And it's already served by probably one of the best green spaces in the community in Armstrong Elementary School, and the sliding hill and the playground, et cetera, there. So I'm wondering if it needs to be a little bit more specific as it relates to maybe the easterly portion of Rosedale Avenue and that area, which I would totally agree with those recommendations that we need to improve sort of neighborhood pocket parks in some of those areas, which makes perfect sense. But I just think it might need to be a little bit more descriptive, because Rosedale residents on the westerly side of Rosedale certainly are well serviced by parks and green space, you know, in that area already.
Through your worship to Councillor Nishi, that's a great suggestion. We can narrow it down. I was wrestling with some of that wording as well. And if we did Rosedale East, I think that would just clarify it. Because that is really what it's referring to, because the schools were accounted for in the park space. So.
Thank you, Lori. Further questions? We can work with Lori and compile a little bit of a list then and give this a little more thought. It was kind of a late of getting the material and getting to review it really quite well. So, work, Councillor Feller.
Yeah, so I kind of agree with that. There's a lot of information and sure, I read through it all, but if there was a test on this, I probably didn't comprehend a lot of it. I think, you know, a report this big with lots of different information than we've normally had to deal with. I think that you have to have some discussions and I like the idea of maybe having an opportunity to have kind of a, I don't know about a workshop, some opportunity, because somebody will ask a question and it'll remind you of something else that you were thought of. And I think it's a really good idea to have a conflab. Is that a word? Sure. Yeah.
And Councillor Nietzsche.
Yeah, thank you. Just thank you, Worship, and through the chair, just building on Councillor Fowler's comments. And I thank staff for emailing me and conversing with me while this is going on so I can understand process. But from my understanding, all we're doing today at the committee of whole is recommending that the document be sent up to council for further discussion. I really would like us to have a little bit more robust workshop with this document as a full council so that we can have the opportunity to sort of go through the recommendations and understand them and you know, kind of think about the real world implications of those. In my opinion, both the OCP and this document are pretty integral planning documents that are going to guide the community for the next, you know, 15 to 20 years. So I think taking our time just to make sure that we're thinking about these things a little bit more doesn't hurt. So I'm supportive of advancing this today and then having more robust discussion with council.
Thank you, Councillor Nietzsche. Would you then support something along the lines that the committee of the whole recommends that we bring back this for a council workshop prior to endorsing the complete communities report? Yes, Chantel.
Thank you, Your Worship. Manager Cordell and I have been in conversation with Councillor Nietzsche in the background, as he mentioned. And for the record, we procedurally cannot go in camera tonight to talk about some of Councillor Nietzsche's things that he wants to address because it wasn't advertised publicly and council didn't amend the agenda, but adopted it as presented. So that's the reason that we can't go in camera tonight. Secondly, there are some inquiries there in camera that he'd like to address. In that time, we can set up, or because of that, we can set up a regular meeting, maybe not a workshop, that we can go in camera and address what needs to be in camera. We'll talk with CAO Seibel. Manager Cordell can bring back some of the questions that you have through email and that are coming more on a technical aspect, and we can figure out the best procedural way to do that. At this point, it might be to, if I had to make a recommendation, follow the resolution that's included on your committee of the whole agenda, and we can procedurally work out which medium is best to bring that back to council for the discussions you need.
Councillor Fowler.
So my only question is, the recommendation is to endorse this, not receive it. Should we be receiving it?
Or through your worship to Councillor Feller, maybe what we could do too is modify it to just say the committee of the whole recommends that council consider the complete communities report at a future meeting. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
All right, can I get a mover on that recommendation? Considers. Thank you, Councillor Weiner. Second by Councillor Fowler. Any questions? I don't see you up there, Councillor Nietzsche. I don't know if you're still with us.
Yeah, I'm supportive of that resolution as amended.
Thank you very much then. And then therefore I will call the vote. All those in favor of the resolution, and that will be carried unanimously. Thank you. And next, Ms. Cordell. Thank you, Mr. Penner. I appreciate your time. Next, the truck route study. Ms. Cordell.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I have prepared a bit of a report, but mostly the purpose of the report is just to stimulate conversation and to provide you with some of the background information regarding the truck route. I prepared a PowerPoint presentation that shows basically the images that are attached to the report. But Jeff Brackett, who's our city engineer, is here to kind of help walk us through this and understand it. And then we're really hoping that we can get some direction on which way council would like us to move forward. So with that, Chantel, can you put the presentation up? Maybe we'll just walk through the pictures. Is that what you think, Jeff?
Sure. Yeah, we can kind of give a narrative, we won't rehash the entire staff report, but give some background and then take a look at some of the key considerations and how we're looking at the trucks moving through, especially the Pleasant Valley North corridor. So that kind of east-west portion north of the railroad tracks. So one of the big parts of the truck study engagement session that we had done is we heard from the community that there's a lot of trucks kind of going from Reimer to Colonial Farms, in addition to all the other trucks moving around the community. They're really going east through west through there. They're using Pleasant Valley Boulevard North to make that connection between the east part and the west part. One of the options we had brought up with them is we said, why are you using Pleasant Valley North? If you're coming from that part of the community, could you just go down Wood? What would be preventing the trucks from going down Wood and keeping them off Pleasant Valley Boulevard North? And what we had heard is that there are some limitations on Wood that make it challenging for trucks to go that direction. So what we've done is, as part of this, is we looked at some of those turning movements. Thank you, Lori, for bringing up the context there. So they're going from the Reimer site up at Curtin Road. Some vehicles, that is. I understand it's something on the order of 1 per hour or 24 hours a day is some of the projections we're hearing. So it's very frequent. It's through the day. And part of that is we're hearing that being part of the long-term truck route as the trucks want to do that. But then also we have to give consideration how we manage that level of traffic during construction. So it's not a matter of us working on the road during a certain time and those trucks being able to get through in off hours or certain hours. Like, we pretty much need to be able to provide access for those trucks all through the day. So what we ended up looking at is saying, where can those trucks go? What are the limitations? And how can we actually get that access on Wood Avenue if we want to use that as an alternative truck route, whether it's during construction or whether it's in a more permanent fashion. If we want those trucks off of Pleasant Valley Boulevard North, we need to give them a place to go so they can make it through the community safely and without creating a situation that's any worse than what they're dealing with currently. And that's part of our discussion as well, is kind of what are those trucks doing currently? So we have some anecdotal information from members of the community, from some city staff who've actually recorded videos of what the trucks are doing to make those turns. Whether it's, and I don't want to pick on just one trucking company, there's obviously other users, there's people coming in off the highway, they're navigating through the community. But we're just trying to get some better understanding of how these trucks are navigating, what the current constraints are, and how they can navigate the community as we seek to make these improvements that'll improve the walkability, that will improve the community amenities on Pleasant Valley Boulevard North, especially where we're trying to create that furnishing zone, that commercial front area that people can congregate and access. Yeah, so if we get back to, back to that PDF or the PowerPoint, and just go up to slide 3, probably.
1.
Yeah. So where we started from was with the understanding that trucks, we said, what if the trucks aren't on Pleasant Valley Boulevard North at all? So let's assume the condition where trucks are no longer permitted on there. So what are they doing? We're seeing them going to Wood. The next 4 slides, so this one and 3 afterwards, are saying what happens if trucks come from Mill traveling north and then west? What happens if trucks are on Mill going south and then west? And then the same thing at the other end. So basically the 2 ways that you can enter Wood and the 2 ways you can exit Wood out the other way. Or the key ways. I mean, you can drive across the intersection at Okanagan and Wood without too much issue. So for this one we're seeing here, we're seeing the trucks, they would basically come across the train tracks, continuing north. And then as they make that left-hand turn, they're having to sweep across the stop bar on a blind corner. So a big thing the trucking community had brought up was that you can't see around the corner of that building. It's a solid structure right up to the edge. They don't know if there's a car there, and if they're waiting to make that turn, sometimes they have to wait until the vehicles are clear to be able to make that turning movement. So they identified that as a significant concern. And they're also even limited on the north side. There's a utility pole right on that corner, so they can't really sweep around that corner either. And so you can, yeah. The other way, so if they're coming up from kind of where the yards are for Reimer, for Shepherds, if they want to come and turn down Mill, they're actually having to come south on the opposite side of the road to make a wide enough turn. And then in so doing, they're also driving across the stop bar. So they can't really make this turn if there's a vehicle stopped there waiting to go either make a left turn or a right turn, or I guess conceivably go across the intersection to the commercial on the far side. So we're seeing that there's a fair number of constraints there, again, centering around that stop bar and around clearances. Okay, next slide. At the other end, so the Okanagan, this intersection of Okanagan and Wood, we're seeing some kind of similar issues where to be able to turn right onto Okanagan and go down that that low-lying road out to the poultry place, they're having to sweep wide across the opposite side of the road, kind of on both sides of the intersection. So they're going into the opposing lane before they go into the intersection, and they're finishing their turn kind of on the opposite side of the road. And it is quite a narrow road in that area. We don't have a lot of blacktop out there. We've got around 6 meters of asphalt. So they're really having to use that entire road surface. We can also see that there's a hydrant on the top right corner where someone's put up a big no-post barrier to keep trucks from hitting it. So it's pretty clear that historically even there's been an issue with trucks making this turn and kind of cutting it too sharp and hitting that hydrant. So we know there's some constraints there historically as well. We also looked at the movements going from Wood south onto Okanagan. In this scenario, we're seeing that there's not so much that they're crossing over before they enter the intersection, but they are sweeping wide and they're sweeping across the stop bar. They're potentially sweeping into where that parking stall is right next to the number 2 on the Okanagan Street. So if there's a car there, there's a larger truck, potentially someone could get kind of stuck and have to back up and take another turn at it. So yeah, so those are some of the issues we saw with trying to use Wood as an alternative connection. We can discuss a bit further what some resolutions would look like, but we can also talk a bit about what we could do at Pleasant Valley Boulevard North to make it open for truck traffic in our revised design. So if we're looking at the revitalization concept and we want trucks to be able to continue using Pleasant Valley Boulevard North, in terms of changes from the current designs and concepts, we'd see ourselves kind of taking those bump out areas where we're able to create a bit more space, where we have that expanded landscape, and we're having to turn that back over to vehicle traffic essentially. So where you're seeing those orange kind of brick patterns, it doesn't have to be orange brick, but it would need to be a surface that trucks could mount, that trucks could drive over, and it wouldn't be somewhere that pedestrians or people could kind of gather or use that space. I'd also note that this is not finished product. This is not what it will look like, but it's our approximation of the kind of configuration you'd be looking at to be able to have those larger transport trucks making those turns. Another thing I would point out is that the model that you see there for the truck, that's not necessarily representative of every truck that's out there. It's the standard turning template. If you have a truck with a cab over, if you don't have a sleeper unit on it, yes, they can make the turn more easily, but we're looking at it from the standpoint of what is possibly the largest combination vehicle you're expecting to see through there in this kind of like a truck and semi trailer configuration.
So just maybe mention where this is exactly.
Oh, sorry. So Pleasant Valley Boulevard North and Okanagan. So we're at the west side of that Pleasant Valley North reconstruction zone. So this is kind of like the western extent of where we'd be proposing to reconstruct the street next year. But really it's kind of, we're opening that up again for trucks rather than having it narrowed down. So when you have that curb bulges like opposite each other, where the pedestrians are kind of closer, it's a shorter crosswalk. We were trying to create that more of an intimate community feel. Whereas this is going to kind of, this scenario would kind of see that opened up again. It'd be a longer crosswalk. The pedestrians would have to go basically from the far corner to the far corner, navigate across a bit of a, like a little rollover curb as well too. Like that paver is not usually level with the road surface. It's usually a little bit of a lip and a drop there to navigate to get through there. But it would just kind of change how that feels, and it would kind of change as well some of our landscape in that area. We would potentially have to even tighten up that landscape a bit further. Those two green bulbs you see at the bottom, those would have to squeeze down a bit smaller to get that sidewalk clearance through there for pedestrians to navigate. If we look at the other ends, now this is the east end of Pleasant Valley Boulevard North, so right where it kind of gets in at Shepherd's, at that end of the street. We're seeing a similar kind of thing where the trucks are having to make like a really kind of wide turn and sweep in there. And again, this isn't finished product. It's representative of kind of like, this is the minimum viable width. We usually also then throw on like a little bit of buffer just to assume that maybe it's not everyone's the best driver. Maybe not everyone can get it right tight so their wheels are shooting by here. But this is the best approximation that we had just of what would be required to get the trucks through there. But it is quite tight. Even in this configuration, there's a utility pole on that corner that I guess trucks are already kind of getting really close to. We're trying to find a way that we can both make this work with trucks and then not incur a lot of additional costs with relocation underground of utilities in that area.
Sorry, whereabouts is the utility pole you're referring to on the center section?
On the intersection, yeah, right at the northwest corner. Yes. So that's what we're really doing there is we're taking that as tight back as we can on the curb without having to remove or relocate that pole. That's a transmission line pole. There's a fair bit of power running on those north-south. So if we have to move that pole or remove that pole, there would be additional costs to be borne by the Pleasant Valley Boulevard North construction project. And then this is another one at the east end. So the previous one, we were looking at vehicles going north on Mill, so coming across the train tracks and then turning left. This scenario is looking at trucks coming from the north, so up where the Reimer Yards, the Shepherd's Yard is, coming down and making the right turn. Same thing, we're really having to kind of open up the throat on that street, which does kind of limit our ability to kind of use that as an entrance feature. So there's kind of some decorative benches, there's some potential signage in there. And that would see that either pushed back or in the case of the south side where we had a landscape feature kind of removed or reduced entirely. We're not in this version showing that landscape at all because we need that full width for pedestrian access. So about a 6-foot wide crosswalk down there. And then taking a look at, what could we do to try and make Wood Avenue a better alternative truck route? So if we don't want to open up Pleasant Valley Boulevard North, what might we have to do to be able to accommodate truck turning movements and members of the trucking community being able to continue to make those turns in the future and then during construction as well too. So this is also something that we could look at as a construction bypass route, even if it's not the direction we go for the ultimate truck route in the long term. We could look at turning Wood Avenue into a one-way road westbound. So what this would do is it would kind of help clear up some of those issues with vehicle conflicts at the stop bar. So in this configuration, you wouldn't have a vehicle stopped at that intersection behind the stop bar waiting to turn because all traffic would be going westbound. So we can kind of allow the trucks, rather than creating that kind of head-on conflict, to have the full use of that roadway on Wood Avenue. There need to be other configurations update or upgrades made as well, like changing the direction on those parking stalls. We might need to shift some of the parking stalls a bit if we want to give a bit more room around the nose of those trucks in case they come closer. Maybe for the next slide, Lori. And then turning that one-way westbound would also, again, it would allow trucks to kind of track into the opposing lane or what is now the opposing lane before making the turn across the intersection. But we can see from this image that it doesn't resolve sort of the conflict going north. It doesn't resolve the fact that there isn't a lot of road width on the north side of the intersection. There would still be an oncoming conflict, so they would still need to wait for vehicles on that side of the intersection to clear or reverse if they're approaching right as the truck is making that turn.
Sorry, Your Worship. I was just trying to get Councillor Nietzsche on the screen so we could see him again, but I think when the presentation's on it, we aren't able to. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. You can read the statement.
Yeah. So basically, those are kind of the key points that we've walked through. Thank you. I didn't know how to do that. Yeah.
Sorry, Mayor and Councillor, bear with us. So Councillor Nietzsche can be in your view, and Lori, you can move that around for sizing if you need it, or move it around this way.
Yeah. So, you know, we made a recommendation just to get the conversation started. This recommendation looks at recommending that we adapt the design of Pleasant Valley Boulevard, and then we use the truck route, use the construction time as a trial to see how things are working, and then pick up more of a formal conversation about the truck route later. I've also provided an alternate recommendation where we don't modify PV Boulevard and we pursue the truck route. So we really wanted to just open up the floor to get some conversation from council and help us understand what direction that council would like.
Thank you, Laurie. Council, questions?
Yeah, interesting. We could still have, if we move, is it possible to just move the stop bar back on Wood Avenue and not go one way? Does that solve anything?
So for the location where we have the stop bars, you can move the stop bar back, but the concerns from the trucking committee, like we'd actually brought that up in the engagement session. Their concern is still the lack of visibility. So they still can't see that there's someone stopped there. And whoever stops there will still have to roll forward up to the edge of the road to be able to see around that.
Right, no,
building.
I understand that.
Yeah.
And there's not mirrors or things. I've seen places where they have mirrors, and people have to be trained to look at them to see what's around the corner on blind corners and things like that. There's ways around it, I guess, eh?
Yeah, there could be options like that. And I think part of our discussion with the trucking community in that engagement session was, is it that you can't make these turns, or is it that you prefer that you don't? So I think there's a certain aspect of their being used to using Pleasant Valley Boulevard North. They prefer that, so they don't have to make some of these other movements. But aside from the stop bar, we also do have them going into the opposite side of the road even before they get into the intersection. So we can see that on the northern part of Mill, they're having a track to the opposite side of the road before they even can come to a stop. So if they came to the stop bar on the north side, like it's still not a perfect solution, is what I would say. Is like any way we go, the intersecting streets, whether it be Mill north of the intersection, whether it be Okanagan north of the intersection, there is still something that I would say is kind of not up to where we'd like things to be. But we're certainly looking for something that doesn't make anything worse. We don't want to make anything less safe or less accessible for the truck drivers or more difficult to navigate.
Councillor Nietzsche?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, through the chair. I really appreciate those last comments. I mean, we have a tight downtown that wasn't designed for semi-traffic. It was designed for horse and buggies back in the day. So coming up with the perfect solution, I don't think is even feasible. I think the last comment that the consultant made there, our engineer made there about what's preferred versus, what we can do. My preference still is to try to limit the amount of heavy truck traffic we have going down PV North. And the reason why I'm leaning that way is because we're doing all of these fundamental improvements to that streetscape, the sidewalk, landscaping, et cetera, because we're trying to build a vibrant downtown. And I get that it still needs to be functional and we still have to have traffic moving, but if we start to severely modify what we've already agreed to in terms of the parking changes and landscaping and all that kind of stuff, and now we're modifying it again, I'm just not sure if we're doing the right thing. I think that in every option, the heavy truck drivers still have to swing out into oncoming traffic in order to make those turns, just because they're not designed for that purpose. They're almost at right angles. So, I'm kind of leaning towards still trying to encourage that truck route to use that Wood Avenue when coming in westbound, and still trying to maintain that, that we don't have those heavy trucks moving through PV North. And maybe my mind fails me a little bit sometimes about my recollection of the conversations, but I always thought that the conversation about heavy truck traffic on PV North surrounded or primarily around loading and unloading and ensuring that we weren't going to be obstructing traffic for those businesses that require trucks to have to load and unload off the street and the impact to the traveling public, given the fact that we're going from 2 lanes down to 1 lane. So I'm still a little bit confused as to how we got into a no truck, but maybe that was the direction and I just don't recall it. But from my perspective, I'm still leaning towards maintaining the status quo in terms of encouraging those traffic truck to try to use Wood Avenue and restricting use as much as possible for heavy truck traffic on PV North. That's just my opinion.
Go ahead.
Through your worship to Councillor Nietzsche, just to provide some clarity on how we landed here. I think we had clear direction that we only wanted delivery trucks on PV North. But when we started to figure out how then we reroute the other traffic, we've just come across these barriers and when we had the truck route meeting. So that's really what's brought us here to have this conversation with you, to understand what your appetite is for which decision. Because we weren't comfortable as staff really making that call without council.
No. Yeah, and it certainly is reflective of staff. And Laura, thank you for clarifying. And maybe while we have the engineer there, and Lori, while you're thinking there, and if you looked at one of those images that you guys put up there, showed sort of Curtin Avenue and sort of an aerial view of the properties that are along Wood Avenue. And I'm just thinking that a long-term solution obviously may be to have truck or road connectivity from Curtin to Okanagan that's properly designed for commercial truck traffic to work along there and avoid that section and more of those turnings.
Through your worship to Councillor Nietzsche, that is something that we are anticipating through the development of that special development area to have some connectivity from Curtin through to Okanagan. The problem with that is, when will that happen? And what do we do in the meantime, right?
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
Councillor Fowler.
Yeah, so we go ahead and allow, first of all, I think I asked at the last meeting if there was a way of reducing the amount of truck traffic that's there. And I kind of got a, no, that's not really going to happen. So, so I got off track. So if we're going to allow trucks on the vibrant downtown narrow street with parking on both sides, how do we allow delivery vehicles to go in there and park to unload, for example, at the garden center when they bring the semi in, and we still have truck traffic? I mean, that's creating a problem there. So how do we get around that particular one? That's question number one.
Through your worship to Councillor Fowler. So in terms of loading, like we had always anticipated having some areas marked with loading times so that nobody would park on the parking. That's what they're doing now. Basically, I watched the garden center truck come in this year and it took up like 5 or 6 of the angle parking. And so, that wasn't really the location we were looking at, but I think to address that, if we can get the loading traffic into the parking area for short term, and then they can, trucks can still go by.
So where my thoughts were going on the angle parking, yes, there seemed to be more distance for those trucks to sort of be off the traveled portion of the road. And if we've got the parallel parking, there's not that same amount of space. Is there room for a semi to park in the area that parallel parking would have been, plus parallel parking on the other side, plus another semi going down the main road? That's kind of where my concern is.
Yeah, and I see that being a challenge there if we're talking about, delivery trucks being semis. So I think part of the discussion we've had with city staff is, what do they need to make an adjustment, maybe the size of the vehicle that they're bringing in. So I'd say that like when you're creating a more compact downtown core, it's not always reasonable to assume that you'll be able to get a full-size, like articulated truck, semi-truck down one of those streets. So I don't know if some of those users have a requirement that it must be a semi, or if there's an opportunity for them to bring in like a smaller non-articulated truck to complete those deliveries. From the historic imagery, we can see everything from sometimes a truck parks on the north side in the angle parking, sometimes a truck stops in a travel lane and just drops its tailgate in the left-hand lane and unloads. So there might need to be potentially tighter enforcement of what the rules are for stopping in the traveled road. As Lori said, we can also establish loading zones where the trucks can pull over entirely and offload in the side. But you know, is there a working buffer where they can kind of stage their pallet jacks? It's going to be tighter on that road because we're going to have south side parking bay, north side parking bay, and then a generous Armstrong width travel lane. So 4.25 meters. It's pretty wide.
So that to me is a real concern, because we already went through all the consultation with the businesses, and that was one of the things we heard from that particular one, that when they're having the deliveries in the season, they don't get to tell them what truck they bring. They're doing deliveries up and down. So that's starting all over again with consultation with the businesses in my mind. I would prefer us not to have to tell them they can't bring semis in there. Like I say, we've already done that route and almost got compliance. I don't know that we got it, but that's one concern I have. So that's, and the other one is, I don't have a problem with narrowing some of those big bulbs. That was more aesthetic than anything else, kind of calming the traffic going down the street. So narrowing some of that, especially if you have the opportunity for vehicles to go over that raised kind of, what'd you call it? Platform area.
Mountable median or something.
Yeah,
to that
something,
effect.
whatever, yeah, that sort of thing. So is there an opportunity, this is totally different topic, I guess. Is there an opportunity to do those things to allow specific vehicles that have to do that, have to have that, and I don't know if there are any that have to, but they say that there are, with the compromise that we're working to remedy the problem on Wood Avenue. And when I say remedy, obviously the corner of Shepherd's, it's a building. They're not going to cut a portion of the building out for us to have a bigger road. But what about on the other side, the other corner where the telephone pole is, I think? And also that business has a front yard that is, I don't know what the setback concerns are there. Is there an opportunity for us to look at acquiring some of that property to make that particular corner wider in the future for when we do want those trucks off that main street? That's number 2.
So, I mean, I guess the question to Jeff would be, how much would we need, and is it viable, and how much would it cost, which we can't answer right now.
Yeah, the cost to be difficult. We could look at some standard kind of corner cuts. So if it's a 3 meter by 3 meter corner cut, like something pretty standard that you take on a subdivision, we could look at what that would do for us if we want to see that in the longer term. We could investigate how that changes the turning movement, but there is a pole on that corner as well.
Yeah,
So it's
relocated.
both.
Yeah, so it would be definitely an expensive fix. It's not impossible. It's
I'm
just
talking about as we
in the long term.
navigate the future.
Yeah, exactly.
After that.
Yeah, and that, I mean, that's part of what we were talking about. In Armstrong, we don't have a ton of enforcement, right? We don't have a lot of capacity to force people to be off of Pleasant Valley Road. And we always talked about it's going to be uncomfortable for the trucks because it's narrow, right? And there's more people all over the place. And so it was, we didn't really develop an enforcement plan to make sure they didn't join. But when we started to look and saw that they could potentially damage our brand new infrastructure, that's really when we started to worry, right? So I think, yes, we could do things now and still work towards a future truck route. That's definitely a possibility.
Okay.
Yeah.
My next 2 are just probably really quick, yes or no's. I think my last, having part of Wood Avenue go one way would be my last yay. I just we've already got enough of that one-way stuff in town, and if there's a way to avoid that, that's just not a way I would really want to go without kicking and shoving and smacking and stuff like that. And then the fourth one was, blah, 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 blah. These trucks. So if we could be able to say to the community, this is what we're doing for now, even though we've gone through all the consultations, we've had a bit of a hiccup, but we're working towards still reducing the traffic on there. But in the meantime, there's a way to allow only the local truck traffic only, like who needs a cement truck and a logging truck and all that stuff going down there. If there's a way to have some of those rules brought in, I think that would soften the blow. At least it would reduce the truck traffic on the main street. And then the rest of that, I'm just having trouble with the question I was going to ask. So I'll let somebody else go. I'll think about it. There was a follow-up to that particular reducing the truck traffic.
Through your worship, to Councillor Fowler too. I mean, we could put signage that says local delivery only or something for trucks. I don't know if we could enforce it, but maybe that's like a friendly encouragement to direct people the other direction. I think you
Councillor
remembered
Crawford?
your question.
Oh,
Can I just,
better ask Stephen.
I'll give you a tomato. Okay. Okay, so that's sort of where I was going, because are there really, like, I don't understand why Reimers would have to be why a truck would have to be coming from Reimers or from that area down to Colonial every hour? Like, where are they taking what to and from? Like,
Yeah, so we had that commentary during the truck route engagement. We then followed up with the business as well. So there's been correspondence with them where they've confirmed what their usage is, what their frequency is, what their vehicle size is as they do that. So as I understand it, there's both hauling stuff in, hauling stuff away, whether it's I guess what they slaughtering, I guess.
The chicken
So
plant.
so they're doing trips back and forth, bringing in cargo, taking out waste, offal, like whatever is produced there, and it builds up, I guess, at quite a high frequency. So they're having to do large volume, and they probably don't want to leave that sitting there for an extended period. Get it to the
then, so it's not that they're going from behind the fire hall to Colonial back and forth once in that. That's where I'm missing.
Well, no, as I understand, there is some of that transit that's routing that way. I mean, from what I understand, like there has been times in the past where when that bridge was out, when it wasn't in use, they were going around kind of the back way. But I understand there's also some restrictions on that for them to be able to kind of make the connection on the backside. So they are quite firm in the fact that they want to be able to and continue to make these movements that we're seeing on the screen here, coming down from the Reimers yard or coming in from the highway and kind of making in the from the other direction.
Thank you. It's hard to accept the compromise when the solution doesn't seem to be particularly great. I guess I feel like we're missing pieces of this puzzle. Have you investigated what it would look like going on to Patterson and then coming back way? And then even if Wood was a one-way, where does the eastbound traffic go then? Even if you're assuming that that's temporary for construction, which I'm still not sold on either. But where does that traffic go and how do they get back to Reimers in that instance? And if there is a solution, why don't we look at that for a longer term solution?
So what they're doing to get eastbound is they're coming back on the other half of the couplet on Pleasant Valley Boulevard South. So they are coming down Okanagan and making the turn through the intersection over the train tracks onto Pleasant Valley South. And then from there proceeding east and I guess making the turn at the intersection on that side. Because once they're in the intersection, they can kind of use the whole road to make their big sweeping turns as they go back or forth. Or for south, it's a straight through out Pleasant Valley back to the highway.
And we did investigate Patterson.
We
the
did,
corner,
yeah. So we did look at Patterson. I think one of the major limitations on Patterson is the intersection at just south of at Patterson and Mill. So it's actually quite a tight 90-degree corner right there. There isn't a lot of movement. There isn't a lot of room for oversweep. We can see that even just from the current traffic, and we're assuming it's, I think the biggest vehicle we thought might go back there is the delivery trucks that service a restaurant, and those are going to be smaller vehicles. We're already seeing some evidence of, truck tires chipping up the curbs or clipping the edge there. So that really is a very difficult pinch point for us to deal with right on that corner there.
And then follow-up question I had was just regarding the intersection at Wood. Like we have the fire hall there. Is there any way that you could borrow some of that big parking lot? Not permanently, but even if the trucks need to swing wide, why can't we have some type of bump out there into that parking lot? It's like, yeah, I think then that could solve some of those sight lines, since we're not actually solving the avoidance of going into the opposing lane of traffic, whatever solution we have. We're just trying to have safety and in sight lines. Seems like an easier solution than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, so when we're running those movements, like we're doing our best guess of what the trucking community might be doing. In some cases, we've had feedback from city staff or residents about what they've seen trucks doing and how they tend to navigate them. We could rerun the trucking movements to see what that would look like if we wanted them to swing wide, but the challenge would be, how do we make sure that the truckers are kind of doing that consistently? Is there some kind of signage? Is there some kind of pavement marking that we would do to make sure that they are kind of following that path that we want them to follow? Because the challenge would be, is a driver who's less familiar with the area, trying to navigate it, if it's at night, if it's a guy just following his GPS, which was a major concern that was brought up by the trucking community, is that the guys just following GPS, they could not do that and then kind of end up a bit tighter into that corner. Of course, with all these things, you just have to think of, what's the likelihood of there being an issue and what's the potential repercussions. We have heard some examples from the city of just truck took out a stop sign at one of these intersections not that long ago. I think that was probably towards the end of June, right in this area. So we know that even in the existing condition, there are still limitations, there are still constrictions they're having trouble navigating in the present condition.
If we could just pull out a bit on that picture there, and we see that road across the top from Curtin over to keep on coming out. That there, so they don't want to use that? It's not usable? What's the deal with that?
Yeah, so in reviewing this with our transportation engineers internally, they had kind of highlighted that and said, we're going through a lot of effort trying to find a way that trucks can go through the community, through the dense core, when it seems like there could be opportunities to divert that traffic elsewhere. I think what it comes down to, though, is that it is private land. There's private land holders, and there's a question about, what are they willing to see done with their yards? And one of the big points that was brought up was that although maybe Reimer is working with Colonial now, that doesn't mean it's always going to be the case in the future. A different company could get the trucking contract to work at Colonial, and then even if we see whether it's a private agreement between those users to go through the backside, that could end if there's any kind of a change to the contracts that govern how they're doing that work now. So there are some limitations there unless we see something like a full dedication to public land and establishing a public right of way for a road through those areas.
The only thing is that if it was a different trucking company, they wouldn't be making that tough corner at the fire hall to get down Wood, or they'd be coming off the highway and have a tough corner at
The other tough part.
Yeah.
the other tough corner.
So if there's something big kind of coming out of the trucking engagement, it was just the number and the frequency of the turns that are coming through that kind of almost a U shape. A lot of the traffic that we've been made aware of in the earlier context of this assignment was the pellet plant, where the trucks from the pellet plant are kind of coming from the highway and then just exiting the community again through Pleasant Valley South, out Pleasant Valley to the east.
So no matter what corner they do, it's going to be an ugly corner. All of them are horrible corners. So the premise here all along was, let's keep the big ugly trucks off the main pretty new downtown we're building. So I think that's just, we just have to continue along that route and we do our best to make sure that we don't have logging trucks and cement trucks and every other giant truck that wants to come through downtown. We'll have to find another way to get there without going through the brand new pretty downtown we're gonna build.
Sort of want to concur with the group. For the most part, I believe that, I think Councillor Wayner mentioned a little bit earlier on in a private or in a conversation to the group before our meeting started, the truck traffic is probably less than 1% of the traffic we're seeing in our community. And we're trying to create a community space for the whole community. And I think that we need to find ulterior options for the trucks to get around the community and provide a safe spot for our pedestrians, family gatherings, and all those things as we planned. That was the whole premise of this. And now to drive a truck down the middle of it doesn't make zero sense to me. Zero. I think we're going to have more problems on Okanagan at all the intersection points than we're going to have at the other end with Kirkton and whatnot. The road is so much wider there. We have train tracks at both sides. If you pace them out, I mean, I certainly didn't go with a tape measure, but the west end of Okanagan is wider than the one that comes up to PV Road, and that seems to be one of the intersections we're trying to force a truck through to get to where they're going. I think we need to give them more run space so they can line up their vehicles straight and not be making corners through the downtown core in that little area. And I would really like to find solutions for Wood and Patterson to allow them to come through the intersections with a straight vehicle, have better visualization, and not be making turns in the community, or as few turns as possible. That's just my perspective.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've just been looking this over and thinking it over. I'm just trying to, like Councillor Draplin mentioned as well, like the lesser evil, and there has to, in my mind, there has to be a better way. I mentioned earlier, and we're talking about 1%. It's significant. It's important. Businesses need to run. They need to have their wares. Their industry needs to run. It's a big problem. I'm hearing Councillor Nitschie's comments, and I definitely hear that, you know, if we're going to make the downtown core revitalized and vibrant, we're going to be taking away from that. We're going to be hindering ourselves. And I don't know if I could bring myself to make Wood Avenue a one-way street. Looking at those options and cornering myself, I would definitely be curious to see what other options are. I am curious about other roads. Like I'm hearing that potentially Reimer Brothers may not always be the company that's providing service for places like Colonial. Like if there was, you've looked at other routes as well. Are there any other routes through the community that would be close to serving their needs, but not quite ideal?
Yes, I mean, Wood is a promising option in the sense that, you know, they've acknowledged that they can make that turn. So we know they kind of can get through there. Patterson, we're just seeing a lot more restrictions on it. And then once you get out of either Pleasant Valley North or South or Wood or Patterson, you're now kind of almost leaving that whole downtown area. Part of the traffic safety and I think it was the traffic safety plan was really looking at kind of the challenges of trucks and larger vehicles on Rosemont as well. So Rosedale, because that's almost where we end up, is we end up kind of looking at trucks down Rosedale and then coming around the long way around the community. It's because if you're not going through one of those 4 streets, you're going all the way around. You're going the long way around and coming at the backside. And not to say that that can't happen, but we kind of brought up or broached some of the topics with the trucking communities about, you know, how would you feel about maybe going a certain way or finding your way through the community. And their feedback is, well, but we need to get through here. There's businesses that we need to get through. There's they're sometimes saying like there isn't really kind of another way for them to get there. Now, is there no way for them to get there, or is it a detour? Or is it a longer way around the community? That's something that we'd be looking at in like a larger scale truck study, like really kind of expanding the area. We've done that engagement. We've put a lot of focus on kind of where we're working now, but it is a longer term question, especially as we look at the 15, 20-year horizon of the revitalization of the community. But really any option other than those is seeing vehicles going all the way out through, I guess, Heritage. Like, is that what's that top one up there?
Highland Park.
Or Highland Park, sorry.
Yeah.
So if they're all the way out there, or at the south side, they're coming in at, you know, Rosedale, or coming around Pleasant Valley on the backside, which seems to really be a challenge, because we also don't want trucks on those roads, because we're trying to get them off there.
I also just want to make one more comment too, is that our focus really seems to be on Reimer Brothers servicing the chicken plant and everything else, but we have better transport going through to all the dairy farms.
Yes.
We have lots of nursery trucks with chickens moving,
Yep.
back and around, right? So I don't know what percentage of, is our focus too narrow, being just on, we're focused in a problem area with, and one group of concerns, and maybe the picture is much
Yep.
larger.
So I want to be clear that I'm bringing that up as an illustrative example. It's a big user from what we're seeing, but yeah, I don't want to limit that to saying it's just them. It's not. That's why we're showing movements still coming in from the highway, or going down Okanagan South off the end of Wood, just to understand, yeah, there are still those users, whether it's them, whether it's the pellet plant, whether it's vehicles passing through to access agriculture that's in those areas. Yes, there are still a lot of vehicles, but at least with those users, we can kind of have a more consolidated base that we can pose some of these questions to, and almost say, like, what is it that makes your drivers or your company want to go these way, and what are the limitations you're seeing there? So almost kind of a sample of the community at large.
And then one other thing, Lori, if you could zoom back in on that intersection at Kirkton there. We know there's a pole that's in the way there at Kirkton and Wood, where that business is in the top left-hand corner. There's another pole there's another pole like 80 feet down from there with nothing hanging on it. And then the infrastructure crosses the road and it crosses Wood Avenue to the south side. I don't understand. I mean, it's going to cost some money, but if we were to remove the pole from that corner and look at where our setbacks actually are there, that we might be able to free up a few more feet. And to add to that, we could put in a stop sign on Mill Street in order to turn left on Wood, so it would slow truck traffic down, and then have a warning system of some sort on Wood Avenue advising to look for truck traffic for some safety perspective. That way we can make the corner going both ways, and we could limit the amount of trailer wheels that are actually crossing the center line onto Wood Avenue. Like, what's there? Where can we change things? I think those are questions we probably need answers to before we make recommendations. We need to know all our options.
It's interesting topic, and there's some decisions that have to be made. I think that it's a bit of an important thing as far as time is concerned, because we're close to ready to go out for request for proposals on the street. But if the cosmetic things can be changed, narrowing some of those wide curbs and still having that roundabout there, so necessary, it's temporarily there available, and we continue to work on alternates to make the turns safer in the future, I think we'll be able to come to a compromise. But the main focus on this whole project started when we got the grant for Kerry, and we wanted to have that downtown done. And I think we got to, without upsetting all the apple carts and everybody that uses that road, I think we just have to find ways. Maybe everybody's going to have to give a little bit and find a way to have a vibrant downtown and make it easier for those trucks to turn. They obviously have a dilemma trying to turn. Maybe there's some things that we can do to help that and to mitigate the problem. But I think we also need to focus on both of those things, the truck route and the downtown.
Thank you. I agree. I think, are we going to have to shut down all traffic anyway on PV Boulevard North while we're doing construction?
Yeah, it'd be a preference in terms of, speed of construction, lowering the cost of construction, to be able to at least close, like, let's say the east half or maybe the west half. Like, it'd be my preference to still keep portions open fronting businesses, maybe send some of the traffic via Shepherd's Lane, so we can still kind of maintain some flow on the park when it's not under construction. I'd like to see it kind of broken up into phasing that way. But preferably, you know, if we have a work area, like a work area east, work area west, that we would not have to kind of keep that accessible for trucks, transports to go through there. Logistically, it would be challenging to do that anyways with the amount of organic soils that we have under the road. So all those areas where you have that huge settlement, asphalt movement, we know that we're going to have to dig down somewhere in the order of 8 feet to get down there. And that won't leave much, like it's tough to leave a shoulder when you're going down that deep, that a truck can drive down.
So I guess that's kind of what I'm getting at, is that if we're gonna have to shut down that road anyway, we're forcing those trucks somewhere for the duration of construction. And so if we're doing that for the duration of construction, why can't that just be the permanent solution? I think, in my view, that if we look at Mill and Wood and try to be more creative with that particular intersection, that we'll be able to find a solution. So I think the more that we've talked about this, I think for me, I feel like that's the solution there to focus on, instead of trying to come up with all these different compromises in different areas of town. I think let's figure out that intersection from my view.
Well, I agree. In the back of my mind, I keep thinking, so we have a problem in the downtown, but how are we going to fix that? By causing a problem elsewhere in town, and that doesn't make any sense. Next thing you know, we have to fix the problem we've caused somewhere else. So we've got to figure this out now and try and do it where everybody can find happiness.
I would like to continue to try to eliminate risk in having truck traffic and areas of gathering in the same corridor. So any solution that works for that works with me.
And just for my last 2 cents, I agree with you, Your Worship. I think we need to explore that intersection of Wood and Mill a little bit more. Take a look at how much right of way we actually have in that area. Take a look at the servicing that's existing in there right now. Take a look at how much property we have both on our fire hall side, and just take a look to see if there's, exploring that stop sign idea. I think is interesting. I just think there's a little bit of work to be done on that intersection that might be a compromise solution. But I agree with the sentiment around council tables, is that I really would like us to maintain, the purpose and integrity of what we were planning to do with the Kari project. And that really is to maintain that vibrant downtown core.
Thank you, Councilor Nietzsche. Any further comments? So neither of the proposed resolutions seem to fit the bill what we're looking at today. So should we just ask that we send this back and come up with some other options? Does that sound reasonable to do, Councilor Draplin?
Sounds reasonable to me. What kind of timeline are you guys on for staff, right? I don't want to delay this. I just want to look at some common sense solutions for that Wood Mill intersection.
Through your worship to Councilor Draplin. So timing is becoming of the essence, I would say. If we could find a way to modify this resolution so that it could help us still move forward. So even if so this is my alternate resolution, that the committee of the whole recommends that council direct staff to pursue the development of a truck route to remove large traffic from Pleasant Valley Boulevard North. And we could even just stop there, or we could add something different, because it's clear that exploring the one-way road isn't something palatable, but maybe we just, end the resolution more general, unless you wanted to add some specifics.
I'm not in disagreement. I don't know how that resolution helps move this forward, because we have come to no conclusion about how we're going to remove this truck traffic. And I think council wants a say in that.
If we say that we want to study that corner of Mill and Wood, and after that first bit, I think that might give us some direction, perhaps.
I guess the direction that we're looking for most urgently is, do we change the design for Pleasant Valley Boulevard North, or do we leave it? And so this gives us that direction at a minimum to keep the design as we had it, I think.
Yeah, well, I guess just more generally is that, should the road be designed in a way that will permit trucks? So just geometrically, will it allow a truck to transit through the area? And then after that, it could be a question of enforcement. So do you design it such that it could accommodate a truck, but that the city may limit the ability of trucks to access it in the future by some means?
Well, personally, I wouldn't have a problem with the shortening those curbs as you come across the tracks at Shepherd's Corner, going down Pleasant Valley. You can still have the colored paving stones or whatever, and it could still be aesthetically nice, but it at least leaves that option of something if someone has to get down there. Down at the other end, was there talk about shortening those as well too? I think that, as I recall, when we were talking about the design at the other end, at the Okanagan Street end, it was more about having those wide curbs to prevent vehicles from going down the wrong way. I mean, that was part of it, I'm quite sure. But again, I don't see a problem bringing those back in as long as it's kind of still decorative. And if a truck has to if the truck gets caught down there somehow or other, they can at least get out.
Yeah.
That's not a big design change, really, is it?
It would just be per the markups that we had presented in the drawing, where it would be reduction of some landscaping areas, tightening up some of those landscape features. Entry feature on the east side might be a bit less room for that, but it can be kind of accommodated within the roadway. We're just trying to find that balance and that compromise between space for the trucks while still achieving kind of the look and the feel that we want to have for that part of the community.
Yeah, for my 2 cents worth from the sky here, I have no issue with that recommendation that Councillor Fowler's bringing forward. And I think we're still going to end up with some truck and some commercial traffic moving down that road, whether they be for deliveries, et cetera. So I think this makes it probably a little more accessible, and it doesn't really compromise the width of the sidewalks and substantially change the amount of landscaping that's there, in my opinion. So I would be in favor of the proposed revisions to that design. And the key here is we can't delay this anymore. We need to get to tender on this and get this project rolling. So yeah, that's my opinion. I would agree with Councillor Fowler. I don't mind these revisions, and but I also think that we need to direct staff to take a look at that intersection of Mill and Wood and see if there's some opportunities there for some revisions.
So, okay, my question would be then, the way it's designed now, is it impossible for a big rig to make that turn without going over the curbs? So it is, okay. I just don't want to make it inviting for every big rig that's coming down there to say, oh, I can make that turn, I'll just do it. So I'm not sure which way to go on that. I mean, I agree, I don't want to slow anything up, but I also don't want to make it easy on the giant trucks. And if it's only, if it's Shepherd's needs a truck down there twice a year, a big truck.
I guess the other point too is that if we made it only accessible from Mill Street heading south, so if somebody decides they want to do something foolish, they're going all around the block, they're going down to Wood, they're coming back up, that would make it less likely truck traffic's going to try to get down that street. So for those local deliveries, they can, the stores, the companies, the businesses could advise that the only way you're getting down that street in a truck is making a right-hand turn off Mill and onto Pleasant Valley Road. And then the no truck traffic would be able to come over the tracks and turn left to get down there. Just a thought.
Your worship, from my understanding, from a practical perspective, I'm not sure making the right versus the left makes an appreciable difference in the changes we have to make to the road anyways. But we could certainly, I could see encouraging that for
If we're
sure.
not putting rollout curbs on that one side, then trucks aren't going to do it.
Well,
The only way they can access it is to come south on Mill Street.
That though the movement south is actually more difficult to make. So they're actually.
That's exactly the point though.
Yeah.
So for local deliveries, people know that that's the only route to come in. They'll drive slowly. It will be safer and it'll stop people coming from Mill Street across the tracks and turning left down PV Road.
Thank you, Your Worship. So looking at this without knowing the outcome of Mill and Wood Street, it would be hard for me to not do something on Pleasant Valley North. I guess the concern that I have though, I mean, we have pedestrians, we have parking on both sides, doors opening on both sides. I know the street will be wider, so it would be nicer to accommodate things better. So I have concerns about trucks driving down that road on a regular basis, if I'm hearing every hour potentially or whatever, my desire would be to limit that to, certain times a day even, or to reduce it somehow to make that safer, especially during peak times. I don't know that I would be comfortable allowing trucks to go down that road during busy times of the day, knowing that that's the route they're going to take.
Yeah, I think I agree with Councillor Fowler and Nietzsche in that making the adjustments to PV Boulevard North is okay. But I also would like to see, hopefully by addressing the intersection at Mill and Wood, that we'll actually be able to create a more preferred route for trucks as they go. It's still going to be an awkward place for trucks to drive when there's parking on both sides. And so I think as soon as we enable them to make that corner more safely, that they'll prefer that route rather than PV Boulevard North.
Ditto. The only thing is it's not just that intersection, it's also the one down at the co-op where they turn down to the co-op. So there's the two intersections that we'd have to find some ways of easing the turn radius, I think.
If the minimal amount of invasiveness we could do to chip on the design to make it the least attractive, to make it look for the people to make that turn, I'm fine with that. I just don't want to make it easy for anybody to have to make that turn if we don't have to. But I understand the concept that we have to do something, so we're not going to ruin it.
So one of the questions, are we able to restrict, like I said, times of day or something else? I'd feel more comfortable going ahead with that, knowing that we were able to create some kind of restrictions to enable that other route. And I don't know how doable that is until knowing that the route's viable.
Through your worship to Councillor Rayner, I did, raise that as an option, changing the times, but I think because we just don't have an ability to enforce it, it's more of a do some education and hope that people follow along, right? So, and by the time you get a complaint about a truck driving down PV Boulevard to get there to even enforce it would be challenging. I think, what right now we're showing the changes as bright orange. If they were more similar to the color of the sidewalk, they would be less apparent and less obvious, and maybe less attractive as a thing. In Vernon, if you go near Walmart, they've done this recently. They put those new roll curbs in and they are orange. And you can see that people drive over them, but we could do them similar color to the sidewalk, maybe a little bit different, but not orange necessarily. And I think that it just won't make them stand out as much, right? I don't know.
So I guess my comment is the education and the awareness piece is the time of day and when they are allowed to be there, and the signage that says that. But the enforcement, to me, yes, I recognize that there are challenges with that, but the easiest way to communicate something like that is to say, this is what we allow and this is the way it should be working.
Yeah, just my last comment. I think that, we have to keep in the back of our mind that we're talking about truck traffic that we need to have in our towns. And it's not that we can eliminate it. We just have to find a way that they can do it and we can have them. And getting down the end of Okanagan Street to the chicken plant, it's one of our very few industries. And, we don't want to be starting to cause problems there. We need them, we want them, employ a lot of people. We just have to figure out a way that everybody gives a little without hurting the businesses.
I think everybody would agree with you there. It's just how we find this balance, this medium, and what does that look like? And as you all know, that I will put pedestrian and safety first each and every time. And people will always take the easiest route, and that's why I would like to do whatever we can to dissuade traffic from using big truck traffic from using PV Boulevard. And so whatever that looks like, Does anybody have a recommendation to move forward so we can proceed? Because I'm pretty much stuck until we have an option. We don't have an option.
Well, just put it on the table. I'll make a recommendation that we pull those curbs in on both ends of PV North. So that we can go ahead and carry on with our project and try and find somebody who will build it for us in a timely manner. And continue to make ways to make it easier for the truck traffic to use Wood Avenue. I don't know if you need all that in a motion, but somebody's up there writing away like crazy, so she'll figure it out.
All right, we do have a motion, seconder. Councillor Todd, thank you. Any further question? I would just like to ask, if we did this and we were able to find a suitable change to use Wood Avenue, could we eventually like put bollards or something up to over top of that, so we're not drastically changing infrastructure to put the road back to what it was intended?
Yeah, there'd be the opportunity to put in some form of barrier or, curb replacement would be a bit more permanent and aesthetic. But I guess with a bollard solution, you could use the kind of bollard that could be removable in the event that there are certain times or occasions when you want to be able to bring bigger trucks through there. So there are things like that that can be done on city streets, like, or even, yeah, yes.
Councillor Todd?
Quick aside here, I mean, the way it's designed now, fire trucks can get down it, obviously, would this make it easy for the fire trucks as well?
Yeah, so there'd be more room, but again, like the vehicle we're checking against is that articulated semi truck. We're not talking about the other vehicles. We can throw some other truck models on here. So we want to, if we didn't want to allow the full size trucks, we could say, well, what size do we want? And we could make sure that we're getting our best fit for that vehicle that you want through there. So the design vehicle for this road, if you will.
But invariably, the truck you don't want to go down there is the one that's going to go down there, right? Yeah.
Well, here's my last comment. I'm just wondering, do we have another meeting set up with the trucking people to talk about any further direction?
I guess it depends on the context and the area that we're looking at. I mean, so we kind of started broad and then we brought it down really tight again to be looking at this specific area to allow us to move forward with the Pleasant Valley Boulevard North tendering for this fall. I think if we do go back to the trucking community, we want to kind of have a better understanding of where our direction is, and that information we're getting back from council tonight is helpful in that. So if we're looking at some option, like if we'd come away with a resolution that we would not have the trucks on there, I would assume that would be another engagement session with the community. And we'll see kind of where we end up here after tonight for planning future engagement sessions. But at a minimum, we need to have an engagement with them about construction routing. So there's going to be, at a minimum, that engagement with them for how the construction will work, the phasing, the timing, and so on.
My third last comment. I think that we may find a need to be a little bit flexible about no truck traffic on there, because we're talking about carrying on keeping our quiet, vibrant downtown project intact, but it may take longer than that to get the fixes on those corners that are going to be tough. So if we have these options now, we can at least allow them if we have to until those corners are easier to motivate. I mean, it's not having to step back again. We've already done that change. So I think that, we just have to, even if we ended up, I'm not saying we're going to, but if we end up moving it for a year or so until everything's changed, we can go back to putting the truck route in place.
Councillor Fowler, could I propose a friendly amendment to your recommendation just to include what Councillor Weiner was saying about making sure that with us endorsing the design changes as proposed, that it comes with a restriction of times for truck traffic on the finished project. Yeah. for further discussion for specific times. Okay.
Councilor Weiner.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that would make me more comfortable that like up until then, I wouldn't be comfortable voting on that, but I think that would make me comfortable moving this forward.
So Chantal, you have an amended motion?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm trying to do that for you. I did first want to be clear that whatever resolution that the committee of the whole tonight is making, it's to to recommend to council at a future regular meeting to direct staff to do this stuff at this point. And Manager Cordell, jump in anytime. At this point, I have what I think I'm hearing the committee of the whole's appetite to be. A motion that the committee of the whole recommends to council to direct staff to proceed with the design changes as proposed, including consideration of time restriction parameters, as well as to seek alternate preferred routes for large truck traffic. How does that sound? Okay, if that captures your
Absolutely.
intent, I
Excellent.
appreciate that.
So that is an amended motion and we're good with that. Do we need another seconder or can it proceed as an amended motion?
I'm comfortable with proceeding as
Thank
an
you.
amended motion.
All right. Any further questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. That was a lot of work, but I think we're getting our point nailed down here. I just wanted to thank Jeff for coming out today. And if there's nothing further, I will take a motion to adjourn our meeting. Moved by Weiner, Councilor Draplin. All those in favor? Thank you. This meeting is adjourned at 6:46 p.m.